The world of Transformers games covers many different platforms, and the platform that we are looking at today is the beloved PSP. Now sadly, the PSP was only ever graced with two single Transformers releases, being Transformers the Game and Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. Now I'm just going to give a light spoiler warning here, these games aren't very good. Now before we go any further, if you like Transformers games, movie tie-in games and nostalgia, then this channel is perfect for you, so why not hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications for all future uploads. Anyway, let's get on with the video. So our first release is Transformers the Game. So Transformers the Game launched worldwide across June to July 2007, depending on where you lived in the world. Now the PSP version was actually developed by Savage Entertainment, as opposed to Traveller's Tales or Vicarious Visions, who did the DS ports. So Savage Entertainment are mainly known for making handheld ports of games. They worked on the Scooby-Doo Who's Watching Who PSP port, the Battlefront 2 PSP port, the Wall-E PSP port, and the Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2 port as well. Interestingly enough, they were also known for creating simulators for different branches of the US government, including the Army, which is just kind of funny, I don't know why. Anyway, Savage Entertainment developed both Transformers the Game and Revenge of the Fallen for PSP, so let's not focus on them any further and talk about the actual game. So the first thing you'll probably notice is that sadly, this game is very ugly. I mean, like, really ugly. There are some bad looking games on the PSP, especially in its earlier days, but by God, this has got to be one of the worst looking games in the whole system. Now, a plus side of Transformers on PSP is that it's not actually a dumbed down version of the console version, it is actually its own game. The Transformers themselves don't look terrible, their vehicle modes I have to say are kind of ugly, some of the car models are just laughable at best and look like they belong on a PS1 or N64 era game. The environments themselves are very empty, bland and ugly, because I guess they've just had to dumb it down a lot from the console versions to squeeze it onto a little PSP, but I'm sure there were other ways around to make this game look slightly less ugly. Anyway, let's talk controls, because that's another thing that just does not work for this console. The control setup for this game is just really awkward, so you move backwards and forwards with the little analog nub pushing it back and forth, but you also have to move this left and right to make horizontal adjustments to the camera, and then you can make vertical camera changes using the triangle and X buttons, which is just, I don't know, a kind of stupid setup, but I guess there's no other way around it. Tapping right on the D-pad can cycle through your weapons, but you can't cycle back by pressing left, which is just very weird. And then once you get used to that control scheme, certain Transformers have a different control scheme, so it's just a bit silly in my opinion. I'm sure a lot of you, once you got used to it, didn't mind the controls, but for me, I just didn't like it, couldn't get on with it at all throughout my time with the game. But at the end of the day, this is just my opinion and my views on the controls in game, so if you're a fan of these things, that's really great. So the game itself has about 20 story missions, where throughout this time you'll switch between Autobot and Decepticon perspectives. It loosely follows the plot of the first Michael Bay film, but also with some Transformers that didn't appear in the film, with some sprinklings from the graphic novel tie-ins and so on and so forth. The issue is, there's just not very good storytelling here, so it's actually quite hard to follow what's going on if you haven't either read the tie-ins, watched the film, or are just a big fan of Transformers. I suppose if you weren't any of these things, you probably wouldn't be buying the game anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. So if you are a player who didn't really have too much time to delve deep into Transformers lore, you wouldn't really know what was going on here. You would just kind of be playing along and stuff would be happening around you, which isn't really what you want when you're making a game. You want your players to be able to understand what's going on. As seems to be the case with most versions of this game, the combat system, whilst fine, is just very bland. The locking on system can be super janky, but when it works, it's fine. Very simple button mashing third person combat along with some shooting. Exactly the same we've seen a million times before in Transformers games, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. So I'm going to try and stop being negative just for a minute, because there is one thing that this game does get very well. The transformation sequences. They look really good, the sound is nice, and it's super satisfying to do it. The first thing a Transformers game should be getting right is transforming, because it's literally in the title. And genuinely, the amount of Transformers games I've covered on this channel where transforming isn't even in the game or is barely a feature is infuriating. So it's nice to see that transforming is once again alive and well in this game. So on top of a single player mode, players were also graced with a multiplayer mode as well. Now, sadly, it's not too exciting. There's no online compatibility to it. It is local only, which means it's only up to 4 players. There's some cool game modes here, including Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, there's a Capture the Flag variant called Secure the Allspark, and there's Ascension Rights, which is essentially just King of the Hill. And to unlock the multiplayer maps, you have to play through the single player story, where most of the maps from that mode have been reworked here for multiplayer. There are also some maps that are not from the story, but for the most part they are just reworked campaign maps. It's a shame because there was some real potential here for a very cool multiplayer mode, but sadly you are just purely locked to local multiplayer. So hopefully you have 3 friends who also happen to all own PSPs and a copy of Transformers the game, and then you'll be having a good time. Otherwise, I couldn't really recommend this game to you whatsoever. Now, in terms of critical response, Transformers the game for PSP is the only version of the game to fall into the negative category on Metacritic. All the other versions of the game lie between about 50 to 67, and that's in the mixed or average zone, but the PSP version sadly falls to 47 out of 100, which just isn't very good at all, with critics citing ugly graphics and bland gameplay being what's pulling this game down, which, to be honest, I completely agree with. Now, here's to hoping that Savage Entertainment learned from the mistakes they made making Transformers for PSP when they came to make the sequel. Right?
No. Wait.
One thing I do just have to say before continuing on with Revenge of the Fallen is that I now have a Discord server. If you want to see some behind the scenes stuff, chat with me and other people about the games I'm playing on the channel, the link for that is in the description of this video below. So yeah, this is Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. This game released worldwide across June 2009, just a mere few days after the film released in cinemas. Anyway, I'm just going to summarize before I start talking about the game. This game is definitely less than meets the eye. Yeah, you see what I did there?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
So again, this is not just a dumbed down version of the console ports, this is its own game. This game is a top-down shooter where you play through linear levels and you just have to shoot everything. Just blast everything in your way, and that's kind of it, there's nothing else to it. I guess after Savage Entertainment failed so miserably at developing in the previous genre, they just thought, fuck it, we'll just make a top-down shooter instead. There are plenty of classics in this genre like Contra, Commando, and even the Dead Ops arcade minigame in Call of Duty Black Ops. This game, however, does not rank among these classics. In fact, the only thing this game really ranks among is being one of the worst games on the PSP ever, basically. Whilst the first game was certainly lacking in quality and life, this game is completely void of all life or any quality whatsoever. So first up, let's talk controls. When you're not firing, the analog nub is full control for your Transformer. Move it left, right, up and down, or in any angle, the Transformer will move in the direction you push it. However, the minute you start shooting, the analog stick will now only let you strafe left and right and move you up and down. If you want to turn, you have to use the left and right buttons. And to be honest, you will spend most of the game with this control set because there's no reason to not shoot half the time. So 90% of your playthrough will be spent with this really stupid control setup. There are a few driving segments that break up the gameplay, but to be honest with you, the gameplay is still just really boring in these sections. The driving is not very good, it's still just more shooting. Overall, just really poor quality. Now, let's talk shooting. The shooting in this game feels like it has absolutely zero impact to your character whilst they're firing, and on top of this, the bullets appear to do like next to no damage to half the characters because it takes them so long to die whilst you're shooting at them. But that is nothing compared to the annoyance of the sound of firing. Whilst each Transformer's guns can sound different, they all only have one single sample per weapon. So as soon as you fired once, you will hear that same sound over and over again. You are going to be hearing these sounds on loop for a good 10 to 15 minutes per level, and it is just infuriating. The best thing you can do if you do for some reason choose to play this game is just play it on mute and have your own music on. Now, the one nice thing I will say about this game is it does have some really nice cutscenes, and it's a lot easier to follow the story here than it is in their first game. Speaking of the story in this game just loosely follows along to the plot of the Revenge of the Fallen film. On top of nice looking opening cutscenes and in-game cutscenes, there is also a really nice menu design here, but really that's where my compliments for this game ends. Earlier on, I mentioned that this game has driving segments, and unfortunately, yes, that does mean that there is no actual transforming in most of the game. You spend most of the game as the robot, and occasionally it forces you to change into car to do the driving sections, and that's it. There's no freedom to change between the two, and that really bothers me. Now, in terms of graphics, I honestly don't know which one looks uglier, this one or Transformers the game for PSP, but to be honest, it doesn't really matter, they both look awful. Thankfully, multiplayer does actually make a return in this game, but whereas in the first game you could play with up to 4 people, in this you only have up to 2. There is a co-op arena-based mode where you fight waves of enemies together, but to be honest with you, it's just exactly like playing through the main story. It's just a bit buggy, boring and bland, and again you still have to listen to the same repetitive shots over and over. And to be honest, back in 2009, I'm sure you would have struggled to have found one of your friends who owned this game for PSP. To be honest with you, none of the versions of the Revenge of the Fallen game are particularly good, somehow being worse than the previous one, but by far, the PSP port of this game has to be the bottom of the barrel. If anyone here has been watching my channel for a while and saw my Cars PSP video, the best thing I could possibly compare Revenge of the Fallen PSP to is Cars 2 PSP. Quite possibly one of the worst movie tie-in games I've ever played. So that takes us to the end of our look at the Transformers PSP releases. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap that bell for notifications. If you want to see any particular franchise games represented on the channel or more Transformers content, comment down below what you'd like to see. Anyway, for now that's all from me, so I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.